the one who actually is the king, but in their minds, they're thinking exactly the opposite. This is a buffoon, that he's a nobody. But we as the readers, we know when we're catching this irony of what's at work, right? He actually is the king. Okay, but it gets deeper than that. Everyone still with me? You got to shake your head. Yes, I am. I got my thinking cap on. This passage is great. There's another irony at work. Another form of irony is called sarcasm, right? We all know how sarcasm works, right? We say something, but we intend the opposite meaning. So let's just say, as an example, it's raining, just raining outside, and you and I walk out, and we're standing under the portico, and I say, "Great weather, huh?" Do I mean, "Wow, this is great weather"? No, I actually mean this is terrible weather. All right, suppose that you're going to work. You're driving your car, you get out of your car, you park, you're getting out of your car, and a fellow coworker comes screaming in the parking lot and almost runs you over, and you hit your hand on the hood of the car and say, "Thank you very much." You don't mean, "Thank you very much," do you? You actually mean like, okay? Watch it. All right, suppose you're at work now, and you're on the phone with an important client, and the person in the office over is having a loud conversation with someone so that you can barely hear the person you're on the phone with. And after you're done with the phone call, you walk over to that office and say, "Could you be any louder?" You're not actually asking them, "Could you please be louder?" You're actually asking what? Be quiet. You're saying one thing, you mean the opposite. So suppose later, afterwards, you're in the break room, and that employee comes up and says sorry, and then you begin to have a conversation with people in the office, and a person who you just think is a complete dunce, who has no future, who's going nowhere, mentions to you, "Guess what? I've decided I'm going to graduate school to get my PhD." And after that person leaves, you say, "Well, good luck with that." Right? You don't actually mean, "Well, I hope you do well, good luck with that." You mean what? Not going to happen. Okay, you get it, right? Now, I want you to see what's going on in this passage. So, there are these soldiers who are using a type of irony called sarcasm, and they are saying, "Hail, King of the Jews." But they don't mean, "You're the king, we're giving you honor." They mean what? "You buffoon, you fool." They're deriding, they're scoffing. So get this. Okay, so on the one level, these soldiers are using irony, and they're saying, "Hail, King of the Jews," but they actually mean, "You buffoon, you're a fool, you're a nobody." So there's this irony going on, but it's like there's this subtle counterpunch, because we know something that the readers don't, right? What do we know? That he is the king. And so it's like, although on the surface level, events look like he's a nothing, he's a nobody, this passage is ultimately proclaiming the exact opposite. It's like one irony hit by another. This passage is proclaiming he actually is the King of the Jews. Does everybody get that? I got to tell you what happened in the first service, right? So at this point in the sermon, you guys are, I don't know, you're processing it still. They were with me. They're shaking their head, "Yeah!" And I said, "You guys are great." And there was someone sitting over here, and they went, "Sarcasm." So I walked over here. I kind of laughed. Everyone was laughing. I said, "Thanks." Or not. You see what's going on in this passage, though, right? It's like there's one intended meaning that they don't mean, but we, the reader, know that he actually is the king. I love how this passage works. I mean, it's so brilliant. It's like one irony, one sarcasm, countered by another that just confirms our faith that he is the king. All right, let's switch gears here a little bit. So, a little while ago, I was driving my car in US 1, and as it happens, as I looked in my rearview mirror, maybe you've seen this person before too, there was someone who was weaving in and out of lanes, looking like they were in a real big hurry. They didn't care where they were going or who else was on the road, trying to go ahead. And what happened was, as I was driving, this person actually cuts in front of me, and there's a truck in front of that person, and all of a sudden we come screeching to a red light, and because they cut in front of me, I don't have time to stop anymore, and so I have to shift over to the other lane. And as it turns out, since we're sitting at a red light, now that person is right there. Maybe you've seen that person before too. And there are all these thoughts that are going through my mind like, man, that guy almost made me crash, and how could he do that to me? So the light turns green, and he's behind a big semi-truck, which is pulling out slowly. And although there's a car in front of me that has a quicker pace, there's this little voice in the back of my mind. And that voice is prevailing, and so I'm not keeping pace with that car in front of me, so that he has to stay behind that truck. I can tell by your laugh that you've seen that guy. I can tell you've done the same thing as me. All right, so I want to ask a question now. What is that impulse which, when confronted with some kind of evil or bad thing that's done to us, we think the way to overcome it is with another injustice or evil or bad thing done to them? Revenge. All right, so those of you who are married, you may identify with this story quite well too. You've been hard at work doing something, and you decide, man, I got to take a break here. You sit down with a glass of water, you're resting for a minute, and your spouse, who walks in the room, has also been working, now sees that you're doing nothing, and is a little unhappy, right? And now does something where that spouse pushes a button, at which point you have a choice, which is say, oh man, I better get back to work, or, as I suspect happens with a few of you, you decide, I've got a button I can push too, right? Or you've been in a conversation with somebody, and they have just made this cutting remark to you, at which point you face this choice where you could smile and just take it and walk away, but instead your mind starts racing for just the perfect phrase to say in return. And some of us, it's like, we couldn't think of it then, but a little later we're in our back, I know what I could have said, and that would have, you know what I'm talking about? What is that impulse in us that makes us want to respond to some evil or bad thing with another evil or bad thing? Okay, consider that. I want to switch gears again. Okay, so let's talk a little bit more about this Bible passage. There is a literary technique that's used in each of the four Gospels, and storytellers use this all the time. What they'll do as they tell a story is they'll gloss over a whole lot of details, a long period of time, and then when they want to key in on a key moment, they'll slow the whole story down and concentrate on each detail. For lack of a better phrase, we'll call this the slow down effect. I'll give you an example. So, suppose I'm a storyteller and I'm telling a story about a 12-year-old girl named Abigail. All right, and suppose the story goes like this. Young Abigail lived the first 12 years of her life in a happy and healthy home. Her family, for the last 4 years, has been vacationing in this cottage up in the woods by a lake. For the first 2 years, she didn't suspect anything. But this last year, she began to have the idea that something was going on. And so on the first day of her vacation this year, as she awoke from her sleep, she got out of her bed and she felt her feet